if what you're doing may pose a risk to your firm. If you're updating Facebook on your iPhone and there's no reference to your law firm on Facebook, the risks of that damaging your business are quite low. But very comprehensive social media policies will say it depends. Facebook's very difficult. You could have 20 friends, and one of them isn't a real friend, is a journalist, or is someone that you put that picture of you at the Halloween party, and it is interesting, and they send a screenshot to the journalist. So if that ends up in the public domain and it's linked back to you, and you can look on the Law Society website and you can see that you are a solicitor, and then they phone your law firm and say, we're running a story about the debauchery of this or that, and what do you say? And the law firm says, now to do with us. There's nothing to stop journalists running that story. So there are always risks, even in your personal use on your iPhone at lunchtime. And if what you're doing has the potential to bring your firm into disrepute, and if you've got a very comprehensive social media policy and it does threaten the brand, there's potential that could get you in trouble. So most social media policies talk about acceptable use at work, and being mindful in your personal use of not doing something that might damage the brand. If you're going to be prescriptive about things, you must run it by this person, and then at least there's some sort of conformity. It depends on the culture of the firm. I've not seen anyone be that rigid and say this is all you're allowed to say on LinkedIn, because the purpose of LinkedIn is that it's a professional networking space, but it's more you.
I mean, I hope law firms will go the other way, and influenced by social networking, that they will let attorneys or lawyers edit their own profile on the firm website, because it's so frustrating when it takes forever to get an update put up. You want to put something on there and you've got to go through various people, whereas we're just so used now to being able to go online and update our own. We know what we've done. Why should we get someone to do it for you? That's
just a glitch in the system. Some law firm, our site's updated all the time. You email her. Yeah. I think that a firm has to stay in charge, has to stay in control of the information that's going through its own website. So there needs to be a central person who's in charge of making sure the website's up to date and doing it quickly so that it's all still current and relevant, but also that it's all on message. And part of the social media policy is knowing that you've got someone senior in BD who he doesn't do the physical uploading, but clears everything before it goes up. It's getting that message to employees that before they press share or send or upload, that it's not just to their friends. And most of their Facebook friends are not probably all friends, but it's not to all their contacts, it's potentially to a much wider audience. And people don't realise that you upload a picture to Facebook and you give them a non-exclusive licence to use the photo. So if a journalist picks it up and publishes it in the national newspaper, and you say, well, I only shared it with my 127 friends and I had an expectation it wasn't going to go any further. The newspaper's first argument is you put it in the public domain, and the second argument is you've got a very difficult copyright claim, Facebook haven't challenged it, and you gave them a license to use it, and we're just reusing that copy. So when you click send, I think it's helpful to have an old auntie or someone as a Facebook friend, maybe in reality or in your mind, before you click update, think about how's this going to sound.
I think lawyers on the whole, we're all trained, to say how would this play out in front of a High Court judge, if you put something a bit injudicious in an email. So we've got that sort of background. And I personally, I reckon I've got two Twitter streams, one on Twitter, the other one in my head, that stays in my head, and I don't share with the wider world. And I think, but I think lawyers, we are trained to be a little bit more careful, hopefully, than the rest of the population. So, but I know it's not always true.
I also think it's largely generational as well, because there's obviously generation-wise, obviously very much engaged with social media activity, and would prefer that over other forms of media consumption. So there are people who are uploading pictures of themselves, drunk and so on now, that aren't thinking about when they go for their law course in the next 2 years, and when they become a lawyer afterwards, and how that's all going to play out.
Have you seen Facebook's new chronology? Most people have been on Facebook for 3, 4, 5 years. There's the pictures from the hen parties, there's the pictures from the birthdays, and they know when your birthday is, they know when you're doing this, they know when, and they've kind of relaunched this new thing that they're going to put all your timeline out, and so you can maybe see yourself getting fatter and more conservative. And, I wouldn't have put that up now, and so it's scary. I think you try and ensure before they go that they've satisfied you that they are adhering to the kind of non-compete rules. So, in the same way as you might not finish a compromise agreement and sign a compromise agreement until they've satisfied you, they've given you back all the papers that belong to the firm. One of the requirements might be, well, we can see the clients you're connected with, your contract has non-compete clauses, this compromise agreement seeks to reiterate those. One of the conditions of you ending the employment in the way that you want it to is that you delete them. And then you just have to monitor it going forward. And I think the LinkedIn example is really interesting because it was very difficult to enforce non-compete clauses unless a client said, well, of course they contact me and I went there. It's difficult to know that contact continued.
I think the problem with most law firms is their tweets are so dull. I mean, rightly so. I can understand that a lot of law firms are just using it as a broadcast medium, as Helena set out. I'm not aware of kind of law firm brands being inappropriate. There are some great cases of kind of particularly individuals who, there was a famous case of a social media expert who went to see some big company like FedEx and landed in the hometown of FedEx somewhere in the Midwest and basically said, my God, this place is a dump. If I lived here, I think I'd die. And he got to the meeting and they had it up on the screen. And of course, when it's the town or the city, the company is a real company city, you're shafted basically. I mean, you're made to look stupid and you're going to lose a client or you're going to lose a bit of business. I mean, hopefully that's the end of it. I mean, you might lose your job, I suppose, but I mean, things like bringing your firm into disrepute. I mean, I think the example we were talking about earlier about a journalist takes something off your profile, and we could debate the sort of copyright ins and outs of that, and whether you could go to the Press Complaints Committee or Commission or whatever, but. I mean, I think there are sort of limits. People are entitled to a social life. People are entitled to a life outside of work. And we're not all, just because we wear a suit in the daytime, doesn't mean, I don't do my gardening, with a tie on. I mean, that's the excitement I get up to the weekend, at least.
I think it's about making sure that you don't link your firm and your practice to your social life. So,
but I think that's really difficult because there's only one me, and I'm the same me at the weekend as I am when I go and see a client. And of course somebody can link. These days, especially if you've got an unusual name like I have, you can always be traced back to what you do. And unless you're kind of some sort of super sleuth who can maintain different profiles, it's really, really difficult.
I think that's a really interesting point because also depending on the social media channel you use, so let's look at LinkedIn, the majority of people use it here for professional purposes, but if you've got a Twitter profile going, then you've got that blurring of boundaries between, well, I've got one account because I don't really want to have two, and I've got professional followers and I've got personal followers in that. So anything that you're posting there, a blurred boundary immediately, and the same with Facebook. And I think that's where it gets a little bit murky.
That's when you have to get quite savvy and clever about Facebook kind of different profiles. And Mishcons has a tweeting policy. It's kind of a think before you tweet, but essentially, if you are tweeting your own opinions, fantastic, but make sure they're your own opinions, because you don't want the kind of Mishcon lawyer into XYZ or whatever sort of headlines. And I don't think law firms want to stifle originality. Most law firms want to attract clever and opinionated people. And that's why you have to give quite a lot of thought to a social media policy and the way that it's enforced. Only I think if you were acting in a way that was actually embarrassing your firm would they ever have to use the policy to stop you.
Often with Facebook as well, one thing that is worth noting is that there are a number of people that will also sign up using a completely different name. So they won't use their real name. They'll call themselves, Johnny Starbuck or something, and use that as a way
Always
to.
up to no good, that guy.
Yes. So essentially, that will be their way of sort of separating their sort of personal from their professional usage. Even though it is still possible, now Google says if you've got 14 pictures of somebody online, that you can essentially work out who they are. So there is that sense of even though you are on the internet, people will always find you, and that's often the way that people guide their own social media users if they're clever. It's just to be mindful of the fact that you can always be tracked down.
I've tried it on LinkedIn. I don't think you get any business out of it.
So you're giving it away for free then?
Well, hopefully it's possible to answer questions, so you answer it and this is the concept we run with Bootlaw, basically, is giving free advice once a month, and you give them just enough so they come back to you. And then,
it's really hard.
Yeah, exactly.
We did what you said.
And then they come back to you and they actually use you for some real work. And so I understand the model, but I did find some of the questions on LinkedIn were pretty dumb. And they weren't from people who were likely to go and spend a lot of money on a decent law firm. I think it's different if you're maybe doing more consumer law type issues, and it's a good way of getting your stuff out there. There are platforms like Quora, which is a social media platform simply for Q&A. And I put something up. There are quite a lot of techie startups on those forums, and so I put a few answers up there, and that's been quite good because they link to you and so on, and you can sort of position yourself as a thought leader. And I think when you're answering the question, you write it as if you're writing an article, and law firms don't really have a problem with writing articles, and you just treat it as this is your essay question, and
particularly if you started with, well, I don't have all the facts, but this is generally the area, and you'd need to